One of the very basic messages of our Catholic faith is simply this, that God loves you. God loves you. That's one of those things I think that we know, but we don't always believe or we don't always feel it. But God loves you. The next question might be, why does God love you? And this gets a little more complicated because there is within many of us, even something that we maybe learned from when we were little, the idea that God's love needs to be earned. When you get a promotion at work, good for you. You probably got it because of your work ethic, or you have some skill that somebody else in the office doesn't have. When you get a certain grade in school, you got it because you finished, scored higher, got more things correct. You get this score and somebody else maybe gets a lower score. Those are things that are earned. But God's love can't be earned. It's a message that I hope can sink deep into our hearts. And it's a message that comes through in the gospel of today. When you read this gospel, you could think, this doesn't seem very fair. Just to recap, this vineyard owner goes out and he hires some guys to begin work at dawn, right before the sun is even up. Get out into the field and work. He hires some others at 9 a.m. He hires some others at noon. He hires some others at 3. And then he hires some others at 5. Everybody gets paid the same. It doesn't seem very fair. The very beginning of the gospel said, the kingdom of heaven may be likened to a landowner. So Jesus is saying that the kingdom of heaven is going to be like this. So you might say, well, that doesn't seem like something I want to be a part of. I don't want to live in a place that's not fair. Fairness is kind of something that's ingrained in us even when we're little, right? In families. Somebody gets something and somebody doesn't get the same thing. It's not fair. It happens at work. It happens in school. It's not fair. But fairness, in the sense that we humans think about it, is not in the same way, is not in the mind of God. There's a comedian years ago who kind of had a whole bit about who's going to be in heaven. And he kind of says, well, I get to heaven and, oh, what, you're here? Oh, I didn't think you were going to be here. I didn't think she was going to be here. I think we're going to be surprised at who we see in heaven. Because our ways are not God's ways. God has a different way of thinking. We've been taught, I think especially in the United States, there's an ethic. There's a work ethic. And it's not always bad. To work hard is good. To earn a living is good. To do well in school is good. To seek a promotion at work is good. But that's not how God operates. God doesn't love you because of your grades. God doesn't love you because of how hard you work. God doesn't love you because of anything that you've ever done. I love to use this image at baptisms of a little baby. Right? That baby hasn't done anything. That baby is maybe a month old. That baby has accomplished 0. And yet God looks at that little baby and says, this is my beloved son or daughter. The baby has done nothing. No A's, no promotion, no nothing. We cannot earn God's love. We see this played out in the life of the church. One of the most famous stories happens at the crucifixion. Jesus is up on the cross, and there are two criminals to his right and to his left. One of those criminals says to Jesus, he professes faith in Jesus, and Jesus says to him, "Today you will be with me in paradise." We could look at that and say, that's not fair. I've worked my whole life. I go to church every Sunday. I've tried to be a good person. I've tried to live by the commandments. I pray. I've raised my kids in the faith, whatever it may be, whatever kind of thing that we can do to try to earn God's love. And that guy, he hasn't done anything his whole life. And at the very end, he professes faith and Jesus brings him with him to heaven? That doesn't seem fair. I get it. But our ways are not God's ways. There can be that same kind of feeling where it doesn't feel right. Somebody leads a horrible life, and at the end of their life, they have a conversion. They're baptized. They go to confession at the very end. They seek God's forgiveness. And they get to go to the same place as me? I've been working my whole life at this God. And they get to go to the same heaven? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. That's how God thinks. His ways are not our ways. We heard it last week. We heard it again today. That God is merciful. That God is full of compassion. And so often we try to earn God's love rather than living our lives in response to a love that's already there. God loves you. Nothing you do, good or bad, is going to change that. But now that you know that God loves you, what does that do to you? What does that make you want to do? For me, it says, well, then I got to live different. I got to live better. I want to live, rather than earning God's love, I want to live in response to God's love. It seems that the laborers in the vineyard, they're mad because the landowner is generous. They would say, he's not generous, he's unfair. I get it. But God's ways are not our ways. And so I really just want to kind of send you out this week with this. And that is that I think we need to worry a little more about ourselves and less about other people. Now that sounds weird coming from a priest. We obviously are responsible for each other. We obviously have to be a part of each other's lives. But I think very, very, very often, it happens in this church, it happens to people all over the world, we get into this world of comparison. Well, my faith is stronger than that person's. My family is better than that family. There's no way that guy is going to heaven. Look at him. Look at the way he acts. Look at the way he prays. And what happens is, we end up not looking very much at ourselves. We're kind of in this constant state of comparing our own faith to that of others. That's what happened to the laborers. The guy at dawn who said, well, I worked harder than the guy at 3 and the guy at 5. I deserve more. The landowner should love me more. I did more. And it's simply not how God works. So an encouragement to look more at ourselves, less at those around us, to stop trying to compare our lives to the lives of others, but to really look inward and say, how am I living in response to the goodness and the love of God? Am I trying to earn God's love? Or am I living in response to a love that's already there? Think about that this week. It can change your life. It can change the way that we live. If we live rather than earning, we live in response. I hope we can take that away with us today. God loves you. You can't earn his love. You already have it. How will we live this week in response to that love? May the Eucharist that we receive strengthen us to live in response, not in comparison, not looking around, not constantly seeing where others are, looking at ourselves, responding in love to the love that is already there.